I'm sitting here in my office in the Melbourne hub of the Centre of Excellence. This is a hub that is shared between two schools in the Faculty of Arts here, the School of Historical and Philosophical Studies and the School of Culture and Communication. The Melbourne Hub has two main chief investigators, myself and Charles Zika, who's a historian who specialises in 17th century European history. And we have a number of postdoctoral fellows here working. One of the great things about the Melbourne Hub is that it does have researchers from both history and from English, I suppose, as well as making connections with the other disciplines in the centre. So most of the people working in the centre nationally are from history and from literature, literary studies, but there are also classicists and musicologists and music theorists as well. And then in the broader group of researchers, we have people who specialise in dramatic performance and of course languages other than, and literatures other than English. The centre is set up between 2011 and 2017, and our mission is really to think about the history of emotions in Europe between 1100 and 1800. So that's a kind of a 700-year period of medieval and early modern history in Europe. However, there is also quite a strong wing of the project that extends beyond 1800 and really thinks about particularly 19th and 20th century Australia and how Australian culture can perhaps draw on that emotional history to make sense of our own place in the world. What's the relationship between contemporary Australia and its long European history? That's only one trajectory of emotions in Australia, but it's the one that we're expert in, and we're trying to make those connections. The centre's work is very diverse. It's a huge area and we can't do everything, but we've organised ourselves nationally into 4 main research programs. The 2 foundational ones, I suppose, are called Meanings and Change. Meanings program is the one that is really doing the uncovering, the archaeological work, trying to work out how people in that medieval and early modern period in Europe talked about emotions, how they described them, how they felt things, what sense they made of their own emotional or affective practices. The Change program is really starting to look at the relationship between the emotions and historical and cultural change. And it's got a particular emphasis, I suppose, towards that early modern period into the 17th and 18th century with the development of a different kind of national sensibility or a different sense of community, a different sense of individuality playing against communal received emotions. The third program is a really, really interesting one for a bunch of historical researchers, and it's on performance. And this is something really quite new, I think, that our centre does that perhaps other centres for the history of emotion worldwide don't always do. This is the program that is very interested in drama, in music, and in art. So how cultural productions of that nature are really working with the emotions. And that leads into the study of contemporary theatre and musical practice as well. When a contemporary audience listens to medieval music, what does that do? How does that make us feel? Are we recreating the past? Are we recreating in a way that is similar to how medieval people felt about that? If we go to a contemporary cathedral in Europe and hear medieval music played, what is the affective role of that music and those performances? The 4th program is called Shaping the Modern, and that's the one that I'm leading here at the University of Melbourne. And this is the program that extends beyond 1800 into the 19th and 20th century. And it has a number of sort of aspects to it, I suppose. One is thinking about the longer history of some of those emotional patterns that we're looking at in the early period, how they change into the 19th and 20th century. Another strong wing of that is how we look back on that earlier period. In Australia, for example, what is our response and our reaction to those long traditions of European heritage? For us, it's about trying to make connections and leaps between the medieval and early modern period and the 19th and 20th century, and I guess particularly in Australia. Although there is another kind of a strong research program that is thinking about the role of colonialism, what happens when emotional regimes and practices from 16th and 17th century England get transported to a new world. When they meet indigenous inhabitants, what kinds of emotional conflicts take place there. Why the history of emotions? It's so endemic. It's who we are. It's what makes us who we are. We aren't just about academics in an ivory tower. We are people who live and work in our own community. For me, it's about making connections between the past and the present. I've always loved the poetry of Chaucer, but why? Why is it that Chaucer's poetry seems to speak to us across those 600 years? Tracking the history of emotions makes sense of that to me. It's the argument of the Centre, and supported by the Australian Research Council, that that dimension to human life is absolutely essential to understanding how we are, how we operate as a culture, how we relate to each other, how we relate to people of different cultural, ethnic background. So even though history of emotions sounds as if all we're studying is just the medieval past, we are really wanting to make connections and comparisons between people now and people in the past. Australia, of course, is a multicultural, multi-ethnic nation now, and there are a lot of differences in the way that we respond, for example, to birth, to death, all kinds of marriage practices. Australia brings a lot of those different traditions and practices together. So the idea is that by understanding differences and similarities between the present and the past, it can actually help us understand differences and similarities in the present within a contemporary culture.